GDP growth in the UK has slowed and the economy is now forecast to enter recession later this year.
That was Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England, speaking earlier this month about the UK going into a recession towards the end of 2022. Well, Hey everyone, and welcome to The Savvy Squaddy. In this video I'm going to show you how to best prepare for a recession and how it's actually a prime time to make money whilst many people are losing it. Before we get into it though, I just want to say that recessions can cause a huge amount of stress on people and their families. Unemployment rises, people's stock portfolios drop, they can't afford their mortgages and even struggle just to get by. Recessions are tough for many people, but with this video I hope to show you how you can avoid that and instead make the best of a bad situation. Firstly then, what is a recession? Well, it's a period of economic decline usually identified by a fall in GDP over 2 consecutive quarters. Now, I say usually because just before the US released their second quarter GDP growth data, they changed the definition of a recession. And funnily enough, a few days later, the US announced their second consecutive quarter of negative growth. I suppose the best way to not be in a recession is to just change the definition and move the goalposts. Anyway, enough of poking fun at the Americans. Some of you might be wondering what GDP is. Well, it stands for Gross Domestic Product, and it's the total of the final goods and services produced within the borders of a country in a given period. That coffee you brought, the taxi you took home the other night, your haircut, and everything else that you buy all contributes to your country's GDP. And that is important because the GDP is used to showcase the economic health of a country. If we are spending lots of money on goods and services, then the health of the economy is rising. But if we stop spending money, then the economy's health decreases. And that can lead to the stock market dropping, businesses shutting down, unemployment rising, and a recession, all of which really aren't ideal. So what can cause a recession? Many different things can be the cause, some that are reasonably predictable, and others that are just come out of nowhere. Things like excessive debt, asset bubbles bursting, high inflation, and sudden economic shocks can all cause recession, although those last two do seem quite familiar. The first recession I remember was the Great Recession, which began in 2008 and lasted for 5 quarters. This was because of the collapse of the housing market due to excessive debt, and it saw a number of large institutions and banks going bankrupt and having to be bailed out by the taxpayers. It was the longest recession since World War II. Unemployment was around 10%, and it took around 5 years for the economy to get back to pre-2008 levels. Then more recently, in 2020, we were hit by a sudden economic shock in the form of a global pandemic, which led to a recession lasting 2 quarters. The lockdowns caused many businesses to shut, and even some went out of business, and people unfortunately lost their jobs. People were not out spending their money, so predictably, the economy declined as we were unable to contribute to the GDP. In the grand scheme of things, this was a very short-lived recession, and the economy soon bounced back once we were all free again. And the fact that the economy bounced back is key to what I will go on to later on in this video. And now, in 2022, where inflation is the highest it's been in 40 years, the Bank of England are predicting that we will enter another recession towards the end of this year. A fair assumption considering the cost of living crisis we are currently experiencing, and people are cutting back on their spending just to keep the lights and heating on. Since 1900 we have had 10 recessions, and the average length is just over a year. However, because it takes 2 quarters of negative GDP growth before a recession is officially announced, usually by the time we hear of it, we're already halfway through it. But how do we get out of a recession? There are a number of things the government can do to boost the economy. They could reduce taxes and interest rates. This then gives consumers more disposable income to spend and boost the economy. Low interest rates also mean less people will save money as rates are low, and instead they will spend it, thus raising the GDP and getting us out of the recession. As government spending is also included in GDP, they themselves could increase their spending, but this can come with longer term issues if too excessive, like inflation rates rising and taxes increasing, the opposite effect of the first two options. And then the central banks could also do a thing called quantitative easing. In simple terms, this is where money is flooded into the market, often by doing large-scale purchases of government and corporate bonds. Because there is now a large supply of money in the economy, the demand for loans is decreased and so are the interest rates along with it. There is an inverse relationship between the money supply within an economy and the interest rates. When one is high, the other is low. As the saying goes, what goes up must come down, and that is no different with what typically happens to the stock market during a recession. It tends to crash, and mainly due to people's emotions. People see their portfolio declining, panic, and then sell, so they don't lose any more money. And because people are selling, other people see the stock price go down and sell as well, which makes it go down even further, and so this cycle continues until all the weak links are gone. But here's the thing, as I said earlier about the economy bouncing back, so does the stock market, every single time. It might take a few years, but it regains its losses and hits new highs. This is why, if you're investing, you need to be in it for the long run. Just look at this chart of the S&P 500, which is an index fund of the top 500 companies in the US, and tends to be the go-to fund to gauge how the economy is doing. You can see the recessions mapped out in grey, and the drops in the stock price that occurred during those periods. But notice afterwards how it eventually rises and surpasses where it was before the recession. All those people who panic sold missed out on those future gains. Many people buy into the stock market whilst it's rising. They are used to seeing their portfolio in the green. So when the inevitable stock market crash comes, and they do come, their portfolio turns to red. They panic and sell. These people have missed the point of investing, which is to buy low and sell high. But guess what? It is these crashes where money is made. Warren Buffett said, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." So while all the paper hands are selling off, locking in losses, all the diamond hands are buying whilst it's on sale, locking in huge amounts of future gains. I was too young and financially illiterate during the 2008 financial crisis to make any money, but during the 2020 crash, due to the plague and everyone selling to buy more toilet paper, on top of my regular monthly deposits, I was buying more each month as the price was dropping and the opportunity to buy an asset which was on sale was too good to miss. And since the market inevitably bounces back, my gains have been amplified due to those purchases at those lower prices. At the time of recording, the S&P 500 is up 27% from its peak before the crash in 2020 and 86% from its lows. Had you sold during that crash, you would have missed out on all that profit. Good luck on getting those kind of returns in a savings account. It's time in the market, not timing the market, that is important when it comes to investing. If you are confident in the assets you have purchased, then you should not be selling during market drops. You should be buying more. And if you aren't confident in those assets, then you shouldn't be invested in them. Only invest what you can afford to lose. I can't say it enough. Buy low, sell high. When the stock market crashes, it's like Black Friday. Load the f*** up. But how can you load up on the next recession if you have no money? Well, you can't. But if you put into practice what I'm about to go through, then it will set you up for success when the next recession comes around, which it will, and will place you in a position of strength. So how can you prepare for a recession? I have said it a lot in my videos and I will say it again. If you aren't already, create a budget. It holds you accountable for your spending and will help free up wasted expenditure that you can use for some of the future points. Secondly, get your debt down as quick as possible and avoid taking on new debt. If you happen to be made redundant during a recession, having outstanding debt is an extra stress that you just don't need. Don't ever think that it won't happen to you, because it could. So prepare like it would, and if it doesn't, then kudos to you. Next up, create an emergency fund. Finding employment when unemployment is rising can be difficult, and if you happen to be unfortunate enough to be made redundant, you need the funds there to be able to still provide for your family. That is what an emergency fund is for, and ideally you want around 6 months of living expenses in a high interest savings account, only to be touched if the worst should happen. And how do you know what 6 months living expenses comes to? That's where that handy little budget comes in. Speaking of being made redundant, how can you increase your chances of not getting the axe? It's fairly simple. You need to make yourself a valuable asset to the company. You need to show them that it would be a great loss to lose you. By going the extra mile on tasks, by learning new skills which can benefit the company through your own personal development, by volunteering, by helping out, and just by being a useful person, you will stand out above and beyond those who just turn up, do the minimum work required, and collect a paycheck. Make yourself invaluable, and you will be valued. This translates into the military as well. Whilst we do have a fairly safe and secure job, redundancies aren't unheard of, and if you're a shit cunt, then you'll be the first to go, and you won't be missed. When times are good, don't be spending all your money on random shit, but instead put some of it away and not just into an emergency fund. This is the money you will use to make more money. This is the money you will need to buy the dip. If the crash happens and you don't have the money to take advantage of it, then that is a wasted opportunity. Always live within your means, and when times are good, put money away to inevitably profit for when the bad times come. And when those times come, and they will, the best strategy is to pound cost average. You cannot predict how the stock market will act or when it will reach its low point. You might buy in at what you think is the low point and it drops again another 20%. So to negate trying to time the market, pound cost averaging is where you regularly and consistently deposit an amount into the stock market so you can guarantee that you benefit from the rise and falls. My video on investing explains this in more detail, a link for that is below. Now, you might not have enough time to put into practice all these points fully, before the predicted upcoming recession this year. But now you know them, you can prepare yourself for when the following one happens, and there's no harm in starting now either. Recessions negatively impact millions of people, but by educating yourself, you will be able to take advantage of the next recession instead of it taking advantage of you. Are you prepared for the potential upcoming recession? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. If you liked what you just saw, please hit the subscribe button up there, and if you want to see some more videos, click over there. See you soon.